Good morning. The New Media Consortium, Learning Revolution, and the Center for the Future of Museums at AAM are pleased to welcome you to 2 days of thought-provoking presentations and panel discussions that will explore the most disruptive ideas and trends for museums across the globe. I'm Holly Ludgate, the Senior Director for Program Development at the New Media Consortium, and I'm honored to welcome you to our first NMC Virtual Symposium for the Future of Museums. The NMC is an international community of experts in educational technology, from the practitioners who work with these new technologies on campuses and museums every day, to the visionaries who are shaping the learning and the thinking labs and research centers, and to the staff and board of directors, the expert panels and others helping the NMC conduct cutting-edge research. You can learn more and formally join the NMC if you go to nmc.org. This is also brought to you by the NMC Academy. Our Academy is a fresh approach to accelerate professional learning among the NMC educators and providing professional, personalized, and powerful mini-courses that inspire and transform teaching practices. This is a completely free online mini-course opportunity that are hosted and are inspired and transformed with a variety of educational institutions and specifically designed for busy educators and faculty serving the students grades 6 through 16. You can learn more and enroll in any of these free courses at academy.nmc.org. During the next few hours, we're going to share 3 keynote presentations for some of the museum's field thought leaders that will investigate 4 major technologies found in the NMC Horizon Report through interactive panels. Today, we'll be hearing from inspirational keynotes. Opening our symposium is Jasper Visser, along with our lunch, Nick Honeysett, and then our closer, Nancy Proctor. You will also be engaging in these panels and the topics such as BYOD, makerspaces, location-based services, and crowdsourcing. And then tomorrow, on July 24th, the Learning Revolution Future of Museums Conference will delve further into these innovative trends via featured keynotes and breakout sessions today. I hope you have the opportunity to attend both of these events. I'm so pleased that you're participating in our symposium and hope that it is a fabulous learning experience for you. I also want just to thank you for being here. I know it takes a lot of work to dedicate yourself to a full day of professional development. This program is live and will be recorded for future access. Each presentation will have its unique hashtag, but NMCHZ is our connect to global conversations on all NMC Horizon project. So before we get started, a few housekeeping items. You should all have a packet that was sent to you, potentially a sign on your door if you do not want to be disturbed during this event. Schedule is in the packet, and then in the next few weeks you'll be receiving a certificate from us, from the NMC, for this event, as well as a badge for your Academy profile. We'll send you more information on that. If you do have any technical issues today, you can contact Darius at 949-273-0479. Don't worry, this phone number is also in your packet if you do need to contact him. And you can also utilize the unified chat to talk. A lot of you already have. There's some great discussion going. And then also you can raise your hand during these sessions. So especially in the panel sessions, if you've got questions, in the top right corner of your screen, you should see an area where you can raise your hand. But we want you really just to sit back and relax and enjoy this rich, deep conversation today. If you do want to go full screen for these presentations, you can click the 4 arrows in the right corner above the video that you're seeing right now, or hit F11 for a full screen video that removes it directly from the browser. Along with myself, Alex Freeman from the NMC will be also moderating several panels for this event. Alex Freeman is the NMC's Director of Special Projects and has 7 years of experience working with art museums in a leadership capacity. He manages our museum initiative, which provides online training and timely research for a variety of emerging technologies being investigated and integrated by museums. Freeman is a co-author and researcher at the NMC for the Horizon Report series, which analyzes technology uptake across global higher education, K-12 education, and a number of other sectors and regions. And he's just an overall great guy, and I feel very blessed to work with him. And now on with the show. I know we want to get started. It is absolutely my pleasure to introduce to you our opening keynote speaker, Jasper Visser, and his presentation, These 18 Facts About the Museum of the Future Will Change Your Life. Jasper is a change agent, innovator and facilitator specialized in culture, heritage, and the arts. With over 10 years of international experience, he helps institutions deal with challenges, formulate strategies for the future of building successful teams. Jasper is the co-founder of several startups that turn his ideas into reality, author of the Digital Engagement Framework, blogger at the Museum of Future, and can regularly be found in good museum cafes around the world. Please welcome Jasper Visser.
Thank you very much, Holly, for this great introduction. It's great to be here. I'll just wait until the director switch the screen, I guess. And in the meantime, make a little note of something I noticed is we're doing this great virtual conference, and there's a phone number as a backup in case something goes wrong. I'm just wondering, 100 years ago, when they started experimenting with the telephone in sessions like this, what was the backup back then? Did people send a postcard to get tech support, or maybe send a pigeon out? It's a great honor to be here, all the way from Amsterdam, where it's at the end of a very warm and beautiful day, and I hope to share some thoughts with you. What I'd like to talk about with you is in a sort of BuzzFeed-like way about 18 facts about the Museum of the Future that I've discovered that may change your life. Now, of course, as much as a BuzzFeed article changes your life, or you believe in kittens, maybe this presentation doesn't do so either. But there will be some audience engagement, and I will invite you to participate in the chat, and hopefully all that together will make this an eventful 30 minutes. What we will talk about briefly, or in the next 30 minutes, we'll talk about a very wide range of topics, ranging from social institutions to museums and technology for health and well-being, to startup culture and the way new innovations in media and technology impact not just the way we present our stories as museums, but also the way we work as organizations in the 21st century. A lot of these topics I will only touch upon briefly, because 30 minutes is a very short time, but there will be panels throughout the day that will dive deeper into these sessions, and I'm really looking forward to hearing much more about all the topics I address. But without further ado, let's get started with these 18 facts that will change your life. And I guess the first fact is kind of an open door. Changes in technology, especially for museums, always represent larger developments in society. I want to start with a little bit of audience participation. And Alex, I'm looking at you and Holly as well to monitor the chat for me. I would like to ask you, audience, to just briefly think about what the #1 social or technological change is that is right now affecting your organization and the way you are working. And I want you to share that comment either in the chat or via the hashtag for this conference, NMCHZ. Talk about with each other about what is the #1 social or technological change affecting your organization. And maybe later on we can highlight some of them. I've made a by no means comprehensive list of all the social and technological issues I've seen people struggle with, museums struggle with, on this slide. On the left-hand side, technology. On the right-hand side, social changes. All these terms, a lot of them familiar to you, and some of them will be familiar to you at the end of the day if they're not yet familiar to you. All these trends are affecting museums, and they're affecting museums sometimes in quite disruptive ways. And what I'd like to do with you is look at some of them and look at how they're related with each other. Because looking at these trends in isolation will not help you find good responses to them. The changes in technology, as I said, change our societies and thereby change our museums. But also because we as museums change, we can change technology and change society. And a lot of the examples I will show you today are a combination of these changes, changes in society and changes in technology that have changed museums and changed the way they worked, and changed the way they approach the future. And I'm guessing that if we look at these changes together in relation, we can come up with a solution for the museum of the future. So, for instance, to give an example of how these changes are related with each other, we've all heard big data, the terminology big data, the words big data recently, and big data is basically a set of technologies and a continuous reduction in costs of these technologies that allow us to deal with data at a scale that until now was impossible. And just to put it in perspective, all the data produced up until 2012, so that's everything basically up until the last 2 years, is only 10% of all the data that has been created since the beginning of mankind, which means that 90% of all the data in the world is created in the last 2 years, including 40 trillion emails sent each year, including the final season of Mad Men, which also adds to the next year, but to me is very important. This incredible change in technology has an enormous impact on our society, and you just have to open the newspapers to see what some people are doing with big data that severely affects our lives. But it also affects us as institutions. I recently read an article about the Library of Congress, who are apparently still archiving all the tweets that are sent as they promised 4 or 5 years ago. And the big issues and the big complications they're finding in archiving this enormous amount of material. So this is a trend that definitely affects us. Another example, and maybe something that you're already witnessing or experiencing, is all these new jobs that are coming up in this decade. I've highlighted two. A social education specialist, if your museum doesn't have one yet, it will have a social education specialist in the very near future. Actually, I'm thinking about becoming one myself because it must be one of the top jobs in the world. Or, and this is a job that is especially interesting to natural history museums, an extinction revivalist. Recently, when I listened to a presentation of the Royal Ontario Museum, they were quite convincingly making the case for reviving the extinct species within the museum context. I think that affects us in quite a lot of ways other than just Twitter. And I don't want to say Jurassic Park yet, but it might be a very good way to get some people in. Unfortunately, or maybe very importantly, if we look at all these changes, I always say that we as museums, we cannot compete on technology. So the best way to address all these technological advances is to start with society. Now, this is not true for all museums. If you go to Wired, the Wired magazine, you'll occasionally read about museums that did manage to invent or innovate on technology. But to most of us, simply we don't have the money big players like Google or Facebook have. So it's important for us to focus on society first. And I want to address the first case I want to address. You can see here I've highlighted some of the trends in society that this case addresses. The way they've looked at trends in society to use technology to become a better museum. And I must say that this might be my favorite museum in the world, the Derby Silk Mill. The Derby Silk Mill is the site of the first factory in the world. It's hundreds of years old. And over the past 4 decades, the Derby Silk Mill has been an industrial museum highlighting the industrial heritage of the mill, of the silk mill, and of the area around the silk mill in the city of Derby in the United Kingdom. Unfortunately, due to budget cuts and other issues, the museum had gone in decline. And a couple of years ago, basically, it wasn't really the most exciting museum in the world anymore. But rather than hiring some sort of expensive consultant and looking at how can we redevelop the museum in the century by bringing in a lot of technology, what they did is they invited the community in to share their thoughts about what a museum should be in the 21st century. They started the redevelopment process from the very clear question: what does this museum mean? Not to us as museum professionals, but to our audience and the people of Derby and the city of Derby. And they've invited people in, gave them coffee, which is always a good thing to do, and they came up with tons of ideas about what a museum in the 21st century in an old silk mill could be. But it didn't stop there. They didn't stop there. They continued to work with people, with the communities, to design the new museum, make drafts for exhibitions, make drafts for the design, make drafts for absolutely everything, even discuss the location of doors and other very important elements of the museum organization. But they didn't stop there. They went even further, and they used technologies as hand, maker technologies, 3D printers, and all sorts of other simple and accessible technologies to turn these ideas into reality, together with their audience. So rather than just co-designing the Museum of Derby, the people co-created the museum, all in all, going as far, and now I skipped some slides, sorry about that, going as far as creating the cases that hold the objects within the museum. They created them with the audience. And you can imagine the sort of buzz this creates if you build a museum from the ground up entirely with the audience, using technology to leverage your investment and to leverage your energy. I call this a social institution. And when I work with institutions, and this is just some of the institutions I've worked with over the years, basically the #1 question they have is, how can we involve our audiences better? And how can we structurally engage our audiences to create this value, to do things like the Derby Silk Mill has done? I call that, or at least I call the result of that, I've started to define it as a social institution. And a social institution is an organization that has in place all the strategies, processes, and technologies to structurally engage all its stakeholders to maximize the co-created value. Well, that's a long definition. I've summarized it for you on a nice blue slide. A social institution is a place where audience and employees systematically work together to co-create value, enabled by technology or leveraged by technology. And I'll show you some examples as soon as the slides advance again. Social organizations or social institutions are not a passing thing. They're not a hype, maybe like social media has been. A recent research by the MIT Business School showed that 73% of all organizations say that social business or being a social organization is very important to them. 90% of leaders are said to believe that social business can create powerful and positive change within their organizations. 57% of employees rather work for a social organization than a closed traditional organization. And 64% of organizations experience positive effects on the business outcomes thanks to social business practices. This is not just a thing, this is not just a buzzword, this is something very real that can help us museums grow and be better. An excellent example of a social institution, or at least a museum that has transformed towards a social institution, is the Mart Museum in Italy. And I'll try and say its Italian name, but don't laugh at me. The Museo di Arte Moderna e Contemporanea de Trento e Rovereto, which is a small contemporary and modern art museum, which you understood if you speak any Italian, struggling from severe budget cuts in recent years. They were really trying hard to get people into their beautiful building, but not succeeding. Until a new leader came, a new leadership and change in leadership, a change in leadership that said, let's put our people first. Let's start working with our audience rather than working for them. And one of the first projects they've done, and truly a mouth-watering project, is the project called Progetto Cibo, or the Food Project, also called Mart Cooking, which is a project in which they invited chefs and local people, local food producers, local wine producers, into the museum. And I'm still having trouble advancing the slides, but let's see if that, I hope you're seeing the correct slides. I know him by heart, so I'll continue talking. Here you can see, and they've invited these people in around the topic of food into their museum and exhibitions around food. But they thought, what is food? Food is not something you talk about. Food is not something you look at. Food is something you eat, and food is something you prepare together as a community. And what you see here is they invited local people, they invited the local community to together engage in food-related projects. They invited the people in, but they bought tickets to have food by the best Italian chefs, thereby making some money with the project as well. Anyway, what they did is they used social media as a multiplier for all the activities within the museum. So and you can see people doing something very odd here with a telephone, which is taking the people of other people, which used to happen with cameras before we started taking selfies. They use social media to use these local events to reach much more people. And if you actually go to their social media channels, and I've sent around a link of my presentation, you can download them and click the links. You will find videos of all the recipes they created, of all the food they created, so you can actually make this at home yourself. So they use digital technologies as a multiplier to engage more people. Most importantly, and I think this is a great quote by one of the project leaders, Luca, he said, "Nearly everything we did in this project violated a rule of the museum. But that was necessary for the organization to transform from a traditional organization to a social institution. To become a social institution, you'll need engaged staff that engages your audience and together systematically creates value that you can again invest in your staff and in your audience to close the loop. And to do so, you need strategies, processes, and technologies. And I'll shortly zoom into each of these three topics: strategies, technologies, and processes, starting with technology. And I think, to me, museum technology is very simple. It's either big or bring your own device, BYOD. And I've made a very simple flowchart for you to make a decision about whether it should be big or whether you should let people bring the technology into your museum yourself. And the basic question you have to ask yourself is, does a technology fit in your living room? And I'm assuming none of you has a very big living room, or at least, you know, a royal size living room. So it doesn't really matter what size living room, but if a technology fits in your living room, I think it's not suitable in gallery. Why? We'll come to that later. Just some quick examples. Maybe the most popular museum technology project, or the most discussed museum technology project, is Gallery 1 in Cleveland. This is big, so it should be in gallery. You can see it's so big, I can't put this up in my living room, and if I did, people would definitely complain. Plus the electricity bill would be not something I'd be looking forward to. Big, definitely something that works in gallery. Another example, even bigger, which you just saw jumping by, is Abadi Museum. And I'll not sing out of copyright infringement fears, but Abadi Museum is a museum where you can go and participate in the experience of being ABBA, where you can stand on stage and sing with holograms of ABBA. This is technology that is so big that it has a place within the gallery. On the other end, if your technology does fit in your living room, it will one day fit in the pockets of people. And if it fits in their pockets, they'll take it to your museum. And rather than using your technology, they'll use their technology to interact with your museum. And a great example of that is this Saturday I went to the Prado Museum in Madrid, and I had the opportunity to look at Hieronymus Bosch's The Garden of Earthly Delights. Well, if you know this painting, it's incredibly detailed, and you need many encyclopedias to know all the subtle references and all the beautiful little details that are in the painting. Fortunately, the Prado offers what they call a second canvas, an app you can download to zoom into the painting until a level that is impossible in gallery and discover details and stories about the painting that you wouldn't have been able to discover otherwise. A great example of using technology, not to the technology people bring, rather than putting this technology in the museum yourself. The next bit of museum technology I want to talk about is not all museum technology has a place in gallery. Some museum technology plays a completely different role, and it plays a role for health and well-being, for instance. Museum technology for health and well-being. And I want to just highlight an app I discovered not too long ago, which is called Rhapsody. And this is an app with a very clear call to action. Within a hospital, this app turns the paintings and the artworks within the hospital, and it adds an audio guide to it. So rather than just walking through the hospital, you can now, like in any museum, put up an audio guide, enter the museum, or enter the hospital, and experience the artworks in that way. And what they found, and this is quite amazing, and you saw it briefly here. If you look at this technology after researching it with the National Health Service in the UK, they found that 100% of patients were relaxed by the guides. 100% of them had their boredom alleviated. 100% of patients experimented a psychological lift. All this because of museum technology used for health and well-being. By doing this, they reduced the average time people spent in the hospital with 1 day, or at least it seems like they did. The proof isn't 100% in yet, but there's signs that it's reducing this by 1 day. Imagine both the advantages for society as well as for individuals if you as a museum can use technology to create apps like this. So it's not just in-gallery, it's also out-gallery where museum technology plays a role. And I guess the most important place where museum technology plays a role outside of the gallery is in stuff like education. My favorite example of that, and the thing I participated in with a lot of pleasure, was MoMA's MOOC, Massive Online Open Course, about art inquiry earlier this year and last year, where you could learn from the best MoMA had to offer, from your easy chair, sitting at home, watching their collection, learning about it, being explained by it, discovering stories about it, and being social around it with other people from all around the world. So the second element I want to focus on is the strategies part. A social institution has the strategies, technologies, and processes in place to continuously engage its audience. And the strategies basically come down to strategies to co-create value. What does that mean? Well, it's a very simple equation if you ask me. Co-creating value means that you as a museum do what you're very good at. And you look at what your audience can contribute. You throw that in the mix and you create something that has a value for the both of you. For instance, and this is maybe my favorite case from the last couple of years, and if the slide progresses, you'll see it. The example of the Palazzo Madame in Turin, Italy, where this is a small museum with a very dedicated, small community of people who like to go to the museum. And early last year, they had the opportunity to buy a very locally important and relevant piece of collection for the museum. Unfortunately, this piece of collection, the Servizio da Seglio, cost them 80,000 euros, and it was more than a museum could offer. So they did what any modern, any good-looking museum nowadays does. They decided to crowdsource or to crowdfund this amount of money, touching into their local community and engaging them in a very simple crowdfunding exercise where they basically sold tickets to the museum, to the people, so that they could gather the 80,000 euros they needed to buy the Servizio. And this was an incredible success. It was such a big success that they did not only raise the 80,000 people they needed, euros they needed. Now they raised the 100,000 euros from more than 1,500 people who contributed by smartly using social media, their local connections with communities, and the asset of the great piece of collection they wanted to acquire. And here you can see what it resulted in. This resulted in clear, co-created value by the museum. So you see here a lot of people coming into the museum, looking at the thing they bought, joining, participating. This is not something the museum did. This is something the museum did together with its audience, co-created value. And the last little part, because we need to hurry up a little bit as well, the last element of the technologies, strategies, and processes are the processes. And while talking about the processes, what I want to do is I want to talk about the very best museum in the world. And you'll say, what is the very best museum in the world? And I hope when the slides open, you'll see it. Because the very best museum in the world is probably the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. And I know I'm biased because I'm from Amsterdam. But I guess if you've seen the Rijksstudio they launched last year, the new website, you'll agree with me that this is a museum that's able to pull off technological advances in an extremely smart way. But, and this is a very important but, the Rijksstudio is much more than a smart website. I recently had the opportunity and the honor to be able to visit the Rijksmuseum for some 4 hours and talk with a lot of people behind the scenes about the success of the Rijksstudio and the success of other projects they're doing. And we talked a lot about how did this happen? What changed within the Rijksmuseum that you've become this example of technological innovation? And there were a lot of different answers. But the most important answer I took away was that this change, this transformation towards the museum of the future was not something done by management. It was not something done by senior leadership. It was something done by absolutely everybody in the organization with a clear vision and a clear goal and clear rules and clear processes. Everybody moved forward to building this museum of the future. And in the 4 hours I spent in the Rijksmuseum, I've seen that the beauty they show to their visitors and the wonderful website they show to their audience, the processes they've put in place on the back end to enable all these great products, they're maybe even more beautiful, and especially to us museum professionals, they're maybe even more beautiful than the stuff you see as an audience. Which brings me to the most important final message of my presentation, is that today you're going to see a lot of very nice examples of new technologies and how they will impact museums and how they will change museums. But in my work with museums and other cultural institutions in the world, I've discovered that maybe more powerful than applying all these technologies to improving your presentation to the visitor or your presentation to your audience, maybe more important than that is that these technologies enable us to transform our organizations, to make our organizations stronger and better and more sustainably able to create these great processes. Most of the technologies you'll see today have as much impact on us as organizations as on other people. And they also enable lots of things. And I'd recommend you to look at my slides, which link I've put on Twitter, to see some of these examples. But I guess my favorite example of this is a very small project I discovered recently, and which will actually be going to New York to the Cocreated Museum later this year, which is called Light is History, a small participatory recycled exhibition created by Samir from Finland, who used recycled materials and the stuff given to him by the audience to create a participatory public exhibition for less than 1,500 euros. What Samir did, he combined all the great technologies we'll hear about today, bring your own device, the maker movement, social media, all these technologies into an exhibition that cost less than 1,500 euros to build and reached thousands of people in a very cold city of Helsinki, probably in winter, and engage them in a very innovative way. The homework I'd like to challenge you, and it's here, is I'd like you to think about how do the changes in technology not just affect our presentations, but our organizations. So use all the things you learned today to look at your organization as much as the projects you're doing. And I'm pretty sure that if you do that, you'll grow a stronger organization, become a social organization, a social institution, and systematically create value with your audience. If you want help with that, shameless plug, together with Jim Richardson from the UK, I developed a framework called the Digital Engagement Framework, which if you Google it, you can download it for free, as well as a booklet about it, which helps you answer all the questions that go into finding solutions to the questions I've posed. So it'll help you by asking lots of questions to develop the strategies, the processes, and technologies needed to become a social institution that structurally engages your audience. The digital engagement framework itself is a social endeavor in which many people, and probably some of the people in the room are on this list as well, participated. Over tens of people from around the world helped us in developing this framework. So it's not a theoretical exercise, but it's an exercise based on the experience of actual museums and cultural institutions around the world. I greatly encourage you to download the book, and if you have any questions, feel free to connect with me on Twitter, on Facebook, anywhere. I hope that I've encouraged you to look at the technologies you'll see today in a broader perspective. Look at how they can change the way you run your organization. Look at how they can have a positive impact on society, and especially how, if you bring them all together, we can become social institutions that systematically work together with our audience to create value. Today is a bit of a sad day in the Netherlands. It's our first day of national mourning in decades after the recent events which you all know about, and it's not a day to be overly optimistic, although nobody really knows what a day of national mourning entails, and nobody really knows what is happening anyway. But there are changes and things happening in society, in our society nowadays, that museums can play a role in helping us deal with these events. Much like the 9/11 Museum in New York is helping people deal with the terrible events of over a decade ago in New York. And I think if we as museums can jump in there and systematically create value in there, we have a very long future, and a museum of the future looks very bright. Thank you, and I guess I'll be around for questions a little while longer.
Thank you, Jasper. That was truly a wonderful way to kick off this symposium. It was so motivating and inspiring to hear what you had to say. And I hope people take you on with that homework challenge, and you get onto our feeds and you start letting us know how you plan to help change organizations. Right after the break, we are going to have our first featured session, which is about location-based services, and Alex will be moderating that panel. Please feel free to take a 10-minute break, and we'll hop back in and get right back to the fun.